This lesson also is concerned with lexicographic evidence. And lexicographic evidence refers to the proof or data used to support the inclusion, meaning, usage, spelling, or grammatical behavior of a word or an expression in a particular reference works. It basically involves documenting the selection of lexicographic data. In other words, it is the evidence that lexicography rely on when deciding, for example, first, whether a word or expression exists in real use, second, what it means, as well as its grammar, third, how it is used, and fourthly, how common or current it is. And as I said in a previous lesson, there are three main types of lexicographic evidence: subjective, objective, and mixed. In this lesson, I will explain objective evidence. An objective lexicographic evidence refers to what we learned about which words and expressions exist in a language and how they are employed when we observe language in use. And I repeat this, when we observe language in use. And this involves the systematic, I repeat, systematic collection and analysis of information relating to words and their usages, so to create accurate, unbiased, and comprehensive lexicographic data that reflect the way words and expressions are used, for example, after time of compiling a particular reference words. The use of objective evidence for lexicographic purposes is well documented. Here is a list of issues related with objective lexicographic evidence that demands a lexicographer's second thought. 1. We know that language is a dynamic system that tolerates a lot of variation, creativity, and idiosyncrasy. And this dynamicity determines the necessity of observing language in many different contexts and how it is spoken by many different types of users. In other words, the use of objective lexicographic evidence demands observing many different types of written and spoken text. 2. Lexicographers typically carry out their work assuming the existence of linguistic and lexicographic conventions. For instance, lexicographers have traditionally aimed at offering linguistic typification. Typification means words and expressions that are both frequent and well dispersed. And this concept of typification, I think, is not very much needed today. I think typification may be related to the world of print, when space constraints were a major component of lexicography. In the digital environment, I think that this concept is not very important, and I therefore maintain that lexicographers should include in the database slots of the lexicographic editing software all the subjective or objective data that they consider appropriate when compiling the lexicographic data. This view, this approach, is a practical and pragmatic approach because there are no space constraints in the online environment, and consequently, the inclusion and treatment of idiosyncratic data, for example, may in fact help someone. There are different types of objective lexicographic evidence: very relevant, literary citations, and linguistic corpora. In what follows, in the rest of this lesson, I will analyze literary citations that Atkins and Randall, and their book published in 2008, define a literary citation as a short extract from a text which provides evidence for a word, phrase uses, or meaning in authentic uses. Although citations can come from any linguistic sources, most, if not all, lexicographic data predating the Corpus Revolution only use literary citations, that are language data extracted from written literary sources, especially those published by well-known and acclaimed authors and newspapers. Literary citations for lexicographic use are typically collected through reading and research by means of manual methods and digital tools to scan and analyze text. There are two main methods for collecting literary citations. One of these is based on user participation. This basically means that citizens have at their disposal the possibility of sending to a physical or digital address the citations they encounter when engaged in their daily activities. For example, reading a novel or talking with someone. A typical example of this method has been used in the compilation of the Oxford English Dictionary. Meyer and Abel, in their publication in 2018, observed that there are three types of user participation in today's digital environment. And they call these three direct user participation, indirect user participation, and accessory user participation. The first one, and they say that this participation is informal, is not subject to specific protocols. In general, this user participation, the three of them, consists in contacting the publisher by email and sending contributions. Let's analyze these three types of user participation. The first one is what they call direct user participation. And direct user participation refers to all user contributions which directly affect the content of a lexicographic product. This category comprises the following. They can be open, collaborative lexicographic products such as Wikipedia and Wiktionary, where there is no fixed group of experts monitoring the user's contributions. These are checked and eventually corrected by other users. A second subtype they mention is what they call collaborative institutional products, such as the one used when compiling the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, where online users usually complete lexicographic data which are checked for vandalism and offense by the publishing house prior to being published. The second one was the semi-collaborative products, such as the text dictionary, where users' contributions are carefully checked by experts before being integrated. These three types of direct user participation are a novel paradigm in lexicography, and therefore it has a name, and this name is usually referred to as collaborative lexicography. Let's go to the second type of user participation. This second type of user participation is usually called indirect user participation, and this refers to feedback given by users to existing or missing lexicographic content, to the reference work as a whole, or to its affected users. It may include suggestions, corrections, supplementary material, usage data, and so on. Users in this category cannot directly modify the content of the reference work, but only include changes indirectly, as for example in the Oxford English Dictionary or in the Leo dictionaries. This category of user participation is associated with the practice of crowdsourcing, which is the practice of assigning tasks to a large group of people or to the general public who may be rewarded with a small amount of money. The biggest potential problem for this category may be the use of material protected by copyright. This has been instrumental in lexicographic projects such as Warnick, including only, for example, images published under Creative Commons licenses. In other words, the protection of copyright material has forced the editors of Warnick to publish only figures that were protected under the banner of the Creative Commons license. And the third type of user participation is referred to as accessory user participation. And this category addresses the general communication between publishers and users, as well as between users themselves. Examples of this type are the publication of newsletters, blogs, podcasts, video channels, and so on, and this is typically used for motivating users to consult publishers' products and to become actively involved in their development. For example, in the discussion pages of Wikipedia and the online forum of the Leo dictionaries. Let's go now to the second method connected with literary citations. This method is the creation of a well-planned reading program. This is a systematic and organized data gathering exercise in which the lexicographer and or publisher is responsible for three main tasks. 1. Identify target text. 2. Recruit and train readers who will comb this test for citations. And 3. They provide a structured way of recording the resulting data. For instance, they can record the following data. That is to say, users has to record the data when they are reading. Keyword or phrases that the citation illustrate. The sentence or paragraph in which the word expression appears, plus any relevant surrounding text. documentation on each citation with details about the source, for example, author, title, publication date, etc., and the specific location within the source, such as its page number and so on. Fourth, analysis and compilation. Citations are entered in a searchable and sometimes sortable storage systems, for example, a database. In general, the use of literary citations for creating lexicographic data also offer advantages and disadvantages. Let's start with the advantages. And the main advantages are the following. 1. They provide authentic usage examples of how words and expressions are used in context, including connotations, registers, and typical grammatical constructions. 2. They monitor language change by offering historical and contemporary documentation that is valuable for both contemporary users and linguistic research. 3. They can easily capture the richness of language and how it is used, for example, for gathering terminology from one or more specialized subject fields, variants of a language, and so on. And, as I said before, literary citations also have disadvantages, especially the following. 1. Collecting, analyzing, and documenting literary citation is time and resource intensive. It is a labor-intensive process that requires significant time and resources. This can make lexicographic projects especially expensive and very lengthy. 2. The choice of the reading sources is always subjective and can therefore introduce bias. For instance, the Spanish lexicographic linguists claim that the masculine form is both specific because it refers to males, and at the same time it is generic because it can refer to both males and females. They base this rule on formal literary citations that are uncritically used time after time. However, analysis of corpus data, especially that of informal conversation, has shown that this is not always the case, because Spanish also uses the feminine form as generic when they refer to someone or something associated with women, something that has been shown in a book published in 1992 by Fuertes Olivera and in an article published by Fuertes Olivera and Tar in 2022. And 3. Literary citations cannot adapt to rapid language changes, especially in this digital age in which language evolves rapidly, particularly in areas like technology, social media, and youth culture. This can be summed up by the claim that keeping a lexicographic project up to date with citation is almost impossible. My fourth disadvantage is that data are highly valuable in today's world, and there are many types of restriction to accessing and using data from literary sources. Any lexicographic project compiled without this data would be out of touch with reality. And some literary citations are a form of objective lexicographic evidence that basically rests on two methods. One of them is weighing of users' participation, whereas the second one is connected to a well-planned reading program. Although it is not much used today, I think that the emergence and popularity of generative AI chatbots can favor the recovery of literary citations in lexicography. I will explore this idea in a new lesson. Thank you.